Welcome, everybody, to a very special video. The prophecy of this channel will finally be fulfilled. It's a long time coming, too. Chair 2.0, you have done your duty, you have performed your chairness, but it's time to be upgraded. Oh yeah, this is a chair right here, everybody. You know, I've sat in a few chairs in my day. This is the one right here. Yep, this is the chair. Oh, man, we've come a long way since sitting on the edge of my bed. We went from bed to dining room chair to, serviceable office chair, let's be honest here, to an actual chair. Okay, good. Now, there's another reason why this video is a big deal. It's because I have just been informed that I have reached 666K subscribers, and number 666. Apparently that's some sort of like number of the beast, devilish number. I don't really know, but I know it has something to do with hell, and a lot of people seem to construe the underworld to hell, and even though they're not really the same thing. And also in One Piece there is an underworld because Brook exists. Straight up confirm the existence of an afterlife in One Piece. So that's what you mean. Like, people always overlook Brook, me included. I forget he's there half the time, but seriously, no, kind of a significant thing, So I thought today, because I got this new chair and because I hit 100,000 subscribers, let's talk about mythology. Why not? Because Oda takes a lot of cues from mythology. In this case, we're going to be looking at Greek mythology because that's the version of the underworld I'm the most familiar with. Oda could throw in his own thing. He could have some artistic license. He could take a bunch of different ideas from the afterlife of a bunch of different mythologies and religions, and he could kind of combine it all together. And that's if even Oda is going to address it more than that, okay? I would hope he does at some point, just because, like, that's the whole wellspring of Brook's ability, and really, let's be honest here, kind of gives us a whole new scope of understanding of what devil fruits are capable of. Like, there's some wacky devil fruits out there that give you the raw power of the elements, like Eneru's able to channel the power of lightning, Aki Inu can control the raw power of magma from the earth, Aokiji can freeze an entire ocean, there's some pretty crazy devil fruit powers out there. But then you get Brooks that allows him to literally come back from the dead, and not only that, but as a bonus, channel the raw power of the souls of the dead into his own body to keep him alive, and channel it into his sword, so he can take it's not just ice or cold or snow like, Monet's ability was, or Aokiji's ability was. No, it's a different kind of cold. It's the cold winds that blow in the depths of the underworld. That is canonically Brook's power, all right? It's pretty impressive, as a matter of fact, all right? So let's take a gander at the Greek underworld and see if it maybe hints at anything that might be coming down the line in the One Piece story, I guess. Let's just roll with that. Are you ready, Barry? All right, let's take a journey down the River Styx, and that's where we're going to be starting, the River Styx. I'm sailing away. It's a good song. Check it out. But anyway, no. So, in the underworld, there are 5, maybe 4, maybe less rivers. That's the first thing let's discuss here with the Greek underworld. We got a bunch of rivers, and then we have a few different realms where the souls of the dead actually go in the Greek underworld. Do not think of it like hell, although there is a region in the underworld, or rather under the underworld itself, because in Greek myth, it's not just bottoming out at the underworld. There's a place even lower than the underworld. That's Tartaros, and that might be a place that might be more, analogous with hell, I guess. But we'll get there when we get there, okay? So you got rivers and you got different realms of the underworld, okay? And of course, it's presided over by the king of the underworld, Hades, or maybe the dark ruler Hades. I'm not really sure. I think it's Hades, okay? Now, this was actually something that got brought up in a stream I did last week where a lot of people seem to think that Hades is the god of death himself. Like, he's the one that controls, like, when you die, and he's like this benevolent, or not benevolent, yeah, malevolent. There you go. Benevolent, malevolent. Those are different words. Learn them. Malevolent ruler of the underworld. I am Hades. I control when you die. I am the ruler of this land. You know, nothing like that. No, he is the god of the dead. He is not god of death itself, okay? That's something else, all right? And he is the king of the underworld, and he's the eldest brother of Zeus and Poseidon that were given birth by Kronos, the god or the titan of time, okay? And not really given birth so much as regurgitated, but that's another story for another day. Greek mythology, man, it's fun. Okay, so Hades is the ruler, and, you know, he's a pretty chill dude, to be honest with you. Like, we talked about this when I did the video on Odin and Heracles, where Heracles' last labor, the 12th labor, was to go into Hades and get Cerberus, you know, Hades' dog, and drag him back to the living world. And Hades was pretty cool with it, all things considered. You know, he was just like, all right, you want my dog? Sure, Heracles, you can have my dog. You just have to, like, you know, I guess if you can wrestle him and you could take him out of here, just make sure to bring him back, and yeah, sure, why not? You know, it's not the same way as if, like, Hades is painted in the Disney films and in a lot of other works. He's not the same as, like, the devil, okay? And even the devil, oh my god, we could talk for days about that, but anyway, we have to stay focused here. Even while writing this video down, like, the notes and everything for it, I'm like, oh, what, that's a tangent, that's a tangent, that's a tangent. Anyway, yeah, aside from the whole Persephone thing, you know, Hades is a pretty chill guy, all things considered, right? He's not as, like, evil as you would think the king or the ruler of the underworld and the god of the dead. You know, you get that impression, like, dead equals bad, which equals evil, which equals, like, Hades as this evil king, but he's not, okay? So, the 5 rivers of the underworld, maybe 4. We have Styx, which is probably the most famous one. This is the one that's, you know, after you die, you purportedly get on Charon's boat, and he will take you, he will ferry you across the river Styx to the land of the dead, all right? Now, this is a concept that existed a little bit later in Greek myth. Before this, there was the river Acheron, which may also be a lake, not a river, and there's some, you know, some depictions, and that's the thing you got to understand, and I went over this in the video with Odin and Heracles, is that Greek mythology, and a lot of mythology just at large, is not a straight set of just rules and stories. It's not like a consistent continuity where it's just like this story takes place and then this story takes place and then this story takes place, because, you know, these were written over the course of hundreds of years. And in the case with Greek, you have Mycenaean Greece that took place, you know, before classical Greece, and there was a dark age in between. So, you know, and a lot of writings from that era were lost, hence being a dark age. So, you know, it's like a lot of this stuff is like, there's one example in this one piece of fiction that says this, but then there's another example in this other piece of fiction that says this. And they're like different, but, you know, you just have to kind of go along with it. So in some cases, Acheron is mentioned to be a lake where Styx empties out into, along with Kokitos and the river Leth might empty into Acheron as like the main lake. In other contexts, it is a river itself. But, and also, Charon may very well ferry you across Acheron or Styx. Styx seems to be the most popular one these days, so I'll go along with that. And Charon himself is the ferryman of the undead. He wears this giant robe. He's very filthy, rather intimidating fellow. I don't think it's ever mentioned that Charon, I think the correct pronunciation is like Charon, but I don't think Charon is ever really mentioned to be like super evil himself. It's just, he has a job to do, right? And a lot of times it's like you have to have the coin. I think many people have heard about that. You have to have the coin under your tongue or like on your person, and he'll ferry you across. But if you don't have the coin to pay for his services, he will not take you across. There's been plenty of examples of classical Greek heroes, you know, going to the underworld, you know, for some mission or something they have to retrieve, like Heracles getting Cerberus, and they always have to, you know, talk to Charon. They always have to talk to this dude in order to get across Styx, in order to get into the underworld proper, all right? Not exactly a gatekeeper. There's some judges that we're going to get to, the 3 judges of the underworld. But Charon is definitely somebody you have to discuss to even get there. And where exactly geographically, because geography is everything, is the underworld in Greek myth? Well, at this point, the idea is that you had Europe, and you had Asia, and you had those lands, and then you had the African continent, but then you also had, which I think back then was, I actually think, called just like Libya by the Greeks, like in general. I remember when I did that Odin and Heracles video, I mentioned the Strait of Gibraltar was between Spain and Libya, and a lot of people were quick to point out, like, it's not, you know, that's Morocco, that's where it is now, that's what the country is now, but back then I think there was like just a general term for the African continent, which was Libya to the Greeks, okay? So the idea, though, is beyond those continents, because the Western world had not been discovered yet, it was just a massive super ocean, all right? It was just a super ocean that covered most of the planet, and this was true even up into the days of the Divine Comedy. When Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, the idea was there was a hemisphere of land and then a hemisphere of water. And if you managed, you could never sail the whole thing because like the limitations of the day with boats and everything. But if you managed to go to the absolute opposite side of the planet, that would be where Mount Purgatory would be, where you can ascend to the earthly paradise and eventually ascend to the heavenly plane. Okay, of course, now this was all like Dante's work of like fan fiction, basically, but it gives you the general idea. There's an area of land that we had discovered at that point, and then there was just a super ocean. And so a lot of the idea is that the river Styx was at like the far edge of this super ocean, okay, or it's on the other side of the planet. There was other you know, references, of course, that it was underground, so like an underworld, like literally, like if you just dug down deep enough, you would eventually, it's like, hey, Hades, how you doing, you know, and everything like that, right? So that, in terms of like the actual location, that's what we're talking about there, okay? So you got Styx, you got Acheron, you also got Phlegethon, which is a river of fire, basically, and that is reference to flow into Acheron, whether it meaning flowing into Acheron as if like just a branch river that's flowing into the main river, or it's like an actual, like Acheron is the lake, and Phlegethon flows into that lake. I don't know. Then we have Kokitos, which is the Wailing River that flows once again into Acheron. There's other references of being just like a circular river that just flows in perpetuity, sort of like an Ouroboros, all right? And this is a place where the murderers of the world are punished. That kind of makes sense why it would just flow infinitely. Like, you're just stuck in this river of perpetual wailing and screaming and torment, and that's the punishment if you have been a murderer in your life, okay? And then finally we have the river Leth, which is a river of forgetfulness, but it's sometimes also referred to just as a plain as well. There's a goddess named Leth, who is the goddess of forgetfulness, also tied to the god of sleep, and so this might be a realm or this might be a river. So that's what I mean when I say, like, at best, we're talking about 5 rivers here. So I guess the lowest number you could get is Phlegethon, Kokitos, and like Styx and Acheron being the same thing, or Styx being a river, but Acheron being a lake. So that's basically what we got there. But yeah, there's 5 rivers. Let's just say there's 5 and then move on. So after you get into the underworld, what awaits you? Okay, well, the underworld, like I said, not exactly hell, but there are different regions where you can go depending on how you lived your life. And this is something that harkens back to Norse mythology and, you know, Christian teachings and stuff. Like, there's a place, if you're really good, if you're a good person, you get to go over here. If you're like a hero, if you're just like, didn't really do much with your life, you go over here. And if you're a horrible person that's committed murders and all these like suffering in the world, and basically if you were a bad person in life, made other people's lives suffering, then you would suffer. You would get sent to a plane in the underworld where you yourself would suffer, okay? And the 3 judges, ladies and gentlemen, that will stand there sentinel at the entrance to the underworld after Charon ferries you across. We got Acus, we got Rhadamenthes, who, probably mispronouncing his name, but it's a cool name, Rhadamenthes. And then we got Minos. And Minos was actually the father of the Minotaur and used to be a king, I believe one of the kings of Crete, and he's actually shown in the Divine Comedy. He stands guard. He's this dude that is just giant guy that has a crown and a snake tail, like a serpent tail around him. And his whole deal is that in the Divine Comedy, the first circle of hell is limbo, which is kind of like the chillest part of hell. It's not really hell proper. It's the place where everybody goes that lived before the time of Christ. So a lot of like the Roman and Greek like philosophers and stuff go there, that just, and unbaptized babies, people that just didn't have a chance because they lived before Christ. But then after limbo, you get to the second level, which is hell proper, which is right before the circle of lust. And Minos hangs out there, and he's basically the sole judge in the Divine Comedy, okay? Where I guess Rhadamanthys and Aeacus, they just quit. But Minos is left, and he's basically there with his serpent tail, and you walk in front of him, and he will judge your soul on which circle you will go to. So, for example, if you were guilty of the worst sin, which is betrayal to, like, one of your benefactors, or even a betrayal upon a god, then he would wrap the serpent tail around himself 9 times to indicate you will be sent to Kokitos, which is the frozen lake at the bottom of hell. Once again, this is just the Divine Comedy, but I'm very familiar with that as well. And, of course, the Divine Comedy wasn't until way, way later than this stuff. But anyway, because this is like Iliad and like the Odyssey stuff we're talking about here. But anyway, so that's Minos in the Divine Comedy. But here, he's actually sort of like the arbiter or the decider, okay? Because Aeacus and Rhadamanthys basically judge the souls on where they'll go, and if there's a deadlock, I guess, then it's Minos that's the one that, like, breaks the deadlock. But there's also some interesting stuff about it, because they actually break up the way they judge the souls of the dead and which part of the area of the underworld they go. They kind of divide it by geography, which is rather interesting, I would say. Aeacus kind of handles everybody that was born in Europe, and Rhadamanthys handles everybody that was born in Asia. And you could look at that from a geographical standpoint. You could also look at that from, like, a racial standpoint. And it's just, you know, that causes some issues in and of itself there. But imagine, like, you die and you go to this afterlife and you're about to be judged and you don't know what to expect. You just died, for God's sake. So you died, and it's just like, all right, what's going to happen to me? And it's like, where were you born? It's like, I was born in the United States. It's like, which state? I'm like, Pennsylvania. All right, go over there into that line. Well, you'll be judged with everybody else that was born in Pennsylvania. Be like, you're deciding where my immortal soul's gonna go based off the geographical region. I was like, okay, and then you just walk. There's the line for everybody born in Pennsylvania. It's right next to Ohio. It's like, hey guys, hey, how you doing? You were born in Pennsylvania. I'm being judged as an Ohioan. It's like, oh, okay, cool, you know. And then everybody else, every other country, every other district or prefecture, it's all divided up. You know, it's just like, that would be a little weird to handle in Underworld, but you know, it's geography based if nothing else. So those are your 3 judges, and that's where you get sent. And now let's look at the different realms of the Underworld proper. Like, where could you get sent? So let's start with the worst one and work our way up to the best one, okay? So the worst place you could get sent in the Greek Underworld, which is arguably not even part of the Greek Underworld proper, is Tartaros. Tartar sauce. You get sent to tartar sauce, okay? And it's stated to be a place that's as far below the Greek Underworld as the living world is to the sky itself. Okay, so it is mentioned to be a separate place, but you can be sent there if you are, you know, dead, as you're like a really bad person, okay? Now, many people might be aware that this is the place where the Titans are sealed. So Zeus and the Greek gods had their war with the Titans, and Zeus and Poseidon and Hades, they won the war, and the Titans, like Kronos and everybody, are imprisoned down in Tartaros. It's full of Titans. It's just a mess down there, okay? And sometimes it's mentioned to just be very dark. It's the furthest place removed from the sun, so it's just a dark and sad and lonely place, you know, and it's that kind of situation. Other times it's mentioned to be a fiery pit, more analogous with, you know, the typical contemporary view of hell. You know, you think of hell, you think like, oh, I am the devil with my pitchfork, and then burning fire, lakes of magma. It's also mentioned to be something like that. Kronos is sometimes mentioned to be the king of this realm because he's like the strongest titan. Other times it's mentioned that he's in prison there, something else that's kind of comparable to Divine Comedy. Sometimes in various myths or legends, it's mentioned that the devil rules over hell. Other times it's mentioned that the devil is actually imprisoned in hell himself, okay? So, you know, take it what you will, but that's Tartarus. If you're a horrible individual, you might get sent there to be punished along with the Titans of old, okay? So the next place that you could go, if we're going worst to best, would probably be the mourning fields. Mourning as in, like, you're mourning, you know, not mourning as like, hey, it's morning outside, right? And it's significantly better than Tartarus, if Tartarus is this just dark void, or if it's a fiery pit of damnation. Either way, the mourning fields are better, but they're still not great. You want to guess what the mourning fields are all about? It is a land that is specifically reserved for individuals that were obsessed with their unrequited loves throughout their existence. So if you love somebody and they don't love you back and you just never get over it, you get sent here. And it's basically an entire dimension of a land, a field, of just other people that are just horribly heartbroken and just moaning and wailing and just living out the rest of their existence in misery. And that's their punishment. That's wow. And also, it wasn't mentioned in Greek myth, but I'm assuming a modern contemporary to this is that if you get sent there, Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel and Pat Benatar's Heartbreaker just plays on a constant loop back to back whenever you get sent there for all eternity. I would probably be, well, I like Elvis, but I would probably prefer more of the Pat Benatar part of that loop. You get to decide when you get sent here, okay? If you get sent here, you get to decide. I'm like, welcome to the plane of pure heartache. All right, so what do you want to listen to? Heartbreak Hotel or Heartbreaker? You can only pick one, and it's on a constant loop for all eternity. And so, yeah, that's the morning fields, all right? Beyond that, we have the Asphodel Meadows. A lot of fields and a lot of meadows in the Greek underworld, okay? But the Asphodel Meadows getting to a place that's okay. It's all right. And that's pretty much what it is, because this is the place where everybody goes that, you know, they didn't commit a lot of bad actions in their day. They didn't murder anybody, but they're also not heroes. You know, there's always a place in a lot of mythologies where it's just like, if you were just a regular Joe Schmo, that you didn't really do much in your life, if you just lived your life and then you worked and then you died and that was it, you weren't some Greek hero, but you also weren't some horrible person. You just go to some place that's just all right. And that's the Asphodel Meadows. It's a place for indifferent souls, souls that never really accomplished anything. It's also mentioned that, like, anywhere where the three judges, Acus, Rhadamanthys, and Minos, just can't decide where to put you, you just get shoved into the Asphodel Meadows. So it's basically like the miscellaneous section of the underworld, where it's just like, yeah, we don't really know what to do with you. Just send them to Asphodel Meadows. So it's probably the place that's the most crowded, if we're being honest here. But yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, you know, it's a pretty meadow. You know, the temperature is like, you know, lukewarm, I guess. The food is okay. You know, it's nothing to write home about. It's okay. It's like a Denny's. It's like eating at a Denny's for all eternity, right? It's not gourmet food, but it's not complete shit. I mean, you've tasted worse. But yeah, that's it. That's the Asphodel Meadows. And then finally, we have the Elysium Fields, the place where Rhadamanthys rules over himself personally. And this is the cool part of the underworld. This is the part you want to get sent, all right? However, it is usually reserved for people that are like demigods or Greek heroes. Socrates got sent to this place. Who else? Socrates got sent here. Achilles got sent here. You know, people that have died, that have done amazing feats that the gods really like. These are the people that, like, are on the gods, like, you know, nice list. You know, just like, oh, the nice list. Achilles. He did some cool stuff in his day. Achilles gets to go to the Elysium Fields. Or the Elysium. I think Elysium is the correct pronunciation there, right? And it's the best place ever, right? It's like the best food, the best wine, the most beautiful, you know, images and scenery is in this place, right? So as in, if you get sent to the Elysium Fields, and if you're a favorite of the gods, you have the option to be reincarnated in a mortal body, all right? You don't have any of the same memories, and you're, like, living a whole new life, but you could choose that if you wish. You don't have to, so you could just choose to stay and hang out in the Elysium Fields with all the other Greek heroes for eternity. Socrates is there. I'm sure he's fun at parties, but if you ever get tired of it, or if you ever get a little bored, or if you ever, like, hey, you know what? I want to give the whole living a mortal life another go. You could choose to be reincarnated. And the thing is, if you get reincarnated into the Elysium Fields 3 times, so if you die and you're a favorite of the gods and you go to the Elysium Fields and you come back and you live another life that is also worthy of the gods' praise, And then you go to the Elysium again, and then you do it one more time. If you do it 3 times, then the gods are like super impressed by you. Like, holy crap, this person is amazing. They lived 3 separate lives, and each one they were worthy of being sent to the Elysium fields each and every time. You know what? This person gets to live for eternity. And I think there's another realm. It's like kind of more ambiguous. It's like a group of islands, and this is basically the place where the gods hang out too. It's ambiguous. It's like, is it a place in the underworld where they go, and it's like super perfect enlightenment paradise? Like, it's like better paradise. It's like there's like the regular paradise package, and then there's the super paradise package, right? Or there's other renditions of this where the person just literally becomes a god because they've lived 3 amazing lives back to back. Each one, they were a great hero or philosopher or somebody worthy of the highest praise of the deities. So they go beyond a demigod. They go beyond a Greek hero. They become a god in and of themselves, okay? So that's the situation there. Now, there's some other stuff about the underworld I wanted to bring up here, and this is stuff that, once again, it depends on the source you're taking it from, but the idea of what you exactly are while you're in this land. And I don't know if this is specific realm, because a lot of these are not that great, but the idea is that the Greeks' mind was, there is an afterlife, but it's sort of, it doesn't really serve a purpose, or it's sort of meaningless to be in this afterlife. It's certainly not in the same idea like you should be living your life so that the afterlife is like paradise. The idea is that I guess the Greeks just had to understand the concept of like, okay, you're alive and now you're dead, but we still remember you, so you have to go somewhere, and that somewhere is the underworld. In fact, Homer even mentioned at one point that the best case scenario would actually be to never be born at all. Because if you're never born, you never die. So the Greeks viewed it as a place where, like, yeah, you existed, but now you don't exist anymore. You're in the underworld, and now, like, there's new people in the living world that's ever changing. And now the underworld is a place that has been mentioned to never change. You never age while you're there, but you never change. The person that you were when you die, when you go there, is the same person you are for all time. There is no change. There is no growth. There is no nothing. In some cases, you even keep the same thing you wear, or if you died and you got, like, blood all over your face, guess what? You're going to have blood all over your face for the rest of existence, right? Not a place that you should want to go. And Hades' whole job is to make sure that people in his realm never leave his realm. Like, you are now part of the dead realm. You do not go into the living realm, all right? That's part of, like, Hades' job to, like, make sure that the gate is, like, held. But it was not as, like, as important as I guess you would think. It did serve a place in Greek teachings, but I like to think that they were more of just about celebrating life and the pleasures of life rather than worrying so much about where you go when you die. They did have a structure for it, of course, but I just don't think it was looked at the same way that, like, heaven is looked at to Christians, for example, right? It was looked as more of just like, this is a place you go when you die. That's it. It doesn't really serve. It's kind of meaningless in that sense, when you're there, but it is a place where you go, So enjoy life rather than what happens after your life, I suppose, might have been a better way of looking at it. But yeah, anyway, and still, though, you don't want to, like, openly shit talk the dead, because if a god particularly likes the person that you are talking bad about, then they might punish you. So in general, yeah, it's probably best to honor the dead and, try to appease them as much as possible, I guess. But anyway, yeah, that's the Greek underworld. Now, might there be anything analogous with One Piece in this situation? Maybe. I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff to take in mind here. So if Oda ever does decide to be like, okay, everybody, after Wano and after Elbaf, we're going straight into Hades, into the bowels of the underworld. Like, and Luffy's just having a great time. He's like, like, yeah, everybody, let's go. They just take the Thousand Sunny down the river Styx. I mean, it's a sailing and pirate manga that takes place on the ocean, so there's 5 rivers of the underworld. There's a way you could make this work, Oda. There is a way. There's like, that's the river of the underworld. No pirates ever sailed that river before. Luffy's like, Nami, chart a course, you know, and then they end up there. And, you know, it would be interesting. I don't think that Oda would go that direction with it exactly, though, because he also has mentioned that he doesn't really like the whole idea of, like, bringing dead characters back to life in the way of them actually, like, talking to the characters, like, as ghosts or, like, well, zombies exist, but zombies are very different in the One Piece world of how, like, you know, an actual zombie, like, they don't retain the memories from when they were alive. You know, it's like a shadow inhabiting a corpse, basically. So different kind of zombie. But, you know, I don't think we're going to do that, really, where the Straw Hats go there and, like, they encounter all the people that have died. You know, like, Luffy gets to meet Ace again in the underworld. I don't think Oda would go that direction with it. But we might have... That doesn't mean we might not get more exposition on the underworld, like Brook explaining really what it is. Or it might be a situation like that, where, like, the dead are not really who they are. In fact, in some cases, it was even mentioned the dead in the underworld are all the same. Their flesh and their muscle and their hair, and they are just skeletons. So the underworld is just a place filled with skeletons. You can't really determine one from the other, and that is their fate. In other ways, they do retain their faces in other works, so there's a way you can look at it there. I guess they could still find Ace in that respect. You just have to look for the skeleton that's just missing, just a giant hole just blown through the first part of their bones and be like, hey, that's Ace! There you go, right? I guess they could do that. But no, I would just like maybe a little bit more explanation, and I think the best way maybe it could come about is through Vegapunk. Vegapunk explains like what devil fruits really are, and if Vegapunk ever were to meet the Straw Hats, which that might still happen, Vegapunk meets the Straw Hats and he encounters, I think Brook would be the most fascinating person for him to meet. Yo! Because, you know, it'd be like, oh, hello there, I'm Brook. I'm a skeleton that got brought back to life with the Yomi Yomi no Mi. I don't know how my body works, but I'm abomination upon the living world, right? And I think Vegapunk would be like, okay, I need to hear your story, you know, like learn about this. Maybe Vegapunk has heard of the Yomi Yomi no Mi before, but ever to actually meet somebody that has been reincarnated through it, let alone Brook, who's like a walking, talking skeleton, that'd be rather fascinating. And like, maybe Vegapunk would be like, yeah, devil fruits, this is how they work. This is what happens with them. And the Yomi Yomi no Mi is very interesting because of this and its connection to the underworld. And it's just like, Vegapunk has like an existential crisis a little bit, like, oh, the underworld exists. Okay, well, that's a thing, you know? And so we might find out more about it then, possibly. But yeah. Anyway, that's the video. I should have saved the Beelzebufo, the devil frog, for this one. That would have worked perfectly, but I already talked about it, so I just don't have a frog fact for you guys this time. So we'll get back to that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking, signing out. Thanks for the 666K subscribers. Later, everyone. Charon. I think it's Charon. I think it's like Charon. It's like a way to pronounce it. Karen. It's Karen. Charon. Charon! Where is... I need to speak to your manager, Charon. Hades shows up and he's like, what do you want?